Okay, so if you've even looked at buying computer memory or maybe an SSD lately, you've probably had that heart-stopping moment of sticker shock, right? I mean, prices have just gone through the roof. So what is going on here? Because let me tell you, this is way, way bigger than just a simple supply and demand blip. We're talking about a massive fundamental shift in the whole tech industry. And how bad is it? Well, this number, it really says it all. We're looking at the average price of DRAM, the stuff that goes into our PCs and laptops, being on track to skyrocket by a staggering 172% through 2025. Yeah, 172%. That's not a typo. And it's not just inflation. This is a massive wall for anyone who wants to build or even just buy a new computer. This quote it nails the feeling perfectly. Things are getting wild when you hear about stores in places like Tokyo's famous Akihara district literally putting limits on how many sticks of RAM one person can buy. I mean, think about that. Something is seriously, seriously wrong. We've watched memory go from being a standard, everyday component to, well, a luxury good. So, what on earth is going on? The first thing you need to know is this isn't a repeat of the pandemic chip shortage. Nope. This is something totally new. It's being driven by a force that is completely rewriting the rules and reshaping our technological priorities. Okay, so what it really boils down to is a battle, a collision, really. It's a fight for the exact same very limited resources. And in one corner, you've got us, right? Everyday consumers wanting to build our PCs, upgrade our laptops. And in the other corner? Oh, just the biggest technological revolution since the internet itself. Artificial intelligence. Let's just think about the two different worlds here. On our side, as PC builders or just regular buyers, we are super price sensitive, right? We hunt for deals, we check reviews, we try to balance our budgets. But an AI data center? They are living in a completely different reality. You have companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta. They are basically placing blank check orders. They're telling the memory makers, we will take everything you can possibly make and we don't care what it costs. They're not just outbidding us, you see. They're playing an entirely different sport. And that brings us to the real culprit. This whole generative AI boom, it's not just some clever software floating in the cloud. No. It requires a massive, physical, real-world infrastructure. And that infrastructure is unbelievably hungry for one very specific and very expensive ingredient. And what is that ingredient? It's called high bandwidth memory. HBM for short. Now, the easiest way to think about this stuff is it's DRAM on steroids. It's built totally differently. It's stacked up vertically, in layers, to create this insanely fast data highway right next to the AI processor. When you're training these huge AI models, HBM isn't just a nice to have. It is absolutely 100% essential. And the scale we're talking about here, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Get this, there's a single massive AI infrastructure project called Stargate. This is the one backed by OpenAI. And it's projected to eat up to 40% of the entire world output of DRAM. 40% for one project. That is a demand signal the tech industry has just never, ever seen before. Okay, but this is the key question, right? Why does them making memory for AI mean there's less for the rest of us? I mean, can't they just make more? Well, it's not just that the AI companies are buying it all up. The problem is much deeper. It's that the very process of making their special memory physically prevents the creation of ours. And this is where it gets really interesting. It all comes down to the raw material. The big, round silicon wafers that all these chips are printed on. See, HBM is an absolute beast to manufacture. Physically, it takes up 3 times more space on that precious silicon wafer than the regular DDR5 RAM that would go in your PC. And on top of that, it's way, way harder to make. The yield, the percentage of chips that actually work, is only about 50 to 60% for HBM. For standard DDR5, it's over 90%. So what does that all mean? It means it's a zero-sum game. For every single unit of HBM a factory decides to make for an AI data center, they lose the physical wafer space to make 3 units of our consumer RAM. Let that sink in. The AI industry isn't just buying our memory, it is literally cannibalizing the factory capacity needed to create it in the first place. So as you can imagine, this manufacturing reality, it's created a huge ripple effect. And now we're all starting to feel the consequences in pretty much every corner of the consumer electronics world. Just how severe is it? Well, it's actually dragging down the entire PC industry. Analysts over at IDC, they're now forecasting that the market, which by the way should be growing, could actually shrink by as much as 9% in 2026. It's simple, really. The higher costs are just pricing people out of the market for new computers. And if you want a really clear, kind of heartbreaking sign of how dramatic this shift is, look no further than this. Micron, who's been an absolute pillar of the DIY PC community for decades with their Crucial brand, well, they're completely shutting it down. They're killing Crucial. They've made a cold, hard business decision. The consumer market just isn't profitable enough anymore to compete with the insane money being thrown around in AI. So this ripple effect hits us in a few ways. First, the obvious one, higher prices. Overall PC costs are already climbing by about 8%. Second, we're seeing shrinkflation, especially in smartphones. New models are quietly coming out with less RAM than you'd expect. And third, there's scarcity. Even older tech like DDR4 memory is becoming rare. And weirdly, in some cases, it's now more expensive than the newer DDR5, just because those old production lines are being shut down. And listen, this isn't just us or some analysts saying this. When the chief operating officer of a monster company like Dell, Jeff Clarke, comes out and says he has never seen costs escalate at this pace, you know the situation is serious. This is unprecedented. The entire industry is sailing in completely uncharted waters. Alright, so that leads us to the big question, the one we all want to know the answer to. When does this end? Is there any relief in sight for us? Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the outlook is pretty bleak. Forecasts show prices are going to keep rising all the way through early 2026. We might see things level off, plateau, late in that year. But all the analysts agree, the absolute earliest we can even hope for a real price correction is late 2027. And all those new factories you hear about being built in the US, they won't be adding any meaningful supply until 2028, or probably even later. And really, that brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. Please understand, this is not a temporary shortage, it's not a bubble, it's not a pandemic-style supply chain snag. What we are all witnessing right now is a long-term, structural reallocation of the world's most valuable manufacturing resources. It's a shift away from our personal devices and towards AI infrastructure. The industry has made its choice. Building the brains for AI is just way more profitable than building our gadgets. So that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought to chew on. For decades, right? We've all lived in this amazing world where technology always gets faster, it gets better, and crucially, it gets cheaper every single year. It's been a constant. But now, as the immense physical cost of this AI revolution really comes into focus, you have to wonder, was that whole era just an anomaly? Are we now facing the real price for a future run by artificial intelligence? And is that price the end of affordable, accessible tech for the rest of us?